I didn't know the woman staring at me from across the dimly lit bar was paid by my husband to ruin my life. All I knew was that for the first time in years I felt completely alive. Welcome back to the channel. If you love intense, dramatic, and romantic GL stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. Your support helps bring more of these stories to life. Now grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive straight into the story. Part 1: The Golden Cage and the Leather Jacket. Olivia stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment, the glittering skyline of downtown Chicago reflecting in her empty hazel eyes. 28, she had everything the world deemed necessary for a perfect life. A massive bank account, a wardrobe filled with designer labels, and a husband, James, who was one of the most successful real estate developers in the city. To the outside world, she was the luckiest woman alive. To Olivia, she was just an exotic bird trapped in a very expensive, very suffocating cage. James was a man of control. He didn't just manage his properties. He managed his life, and by extension, he managed Olivia. Every dinner party they attended was carefully curated. Every word she spoke in public was expected to reflect perfectly on him. Lately, his controlling nature had morphed into a quiet, simmering paranoia. He had begun questioning her daily routines, checking the mileage on her car, and demanding to know exactly who she was having lunch with. The irony was that Olivia had nothing to hide. Her days were painfully monotonous: art galleries, silent walks through the park, and sipping black coffee in obscure cafes just to avoid the hollow silence of her own home. But over the past week, that mind-numbing routine had been shattered by a strange, unnerving sensation. She was being watched. Started subtly. A reflection in a storefront window on Fifth Avenue. The roar of a heavy motorcycle lingering just a little too long at the intersection near her favorite bookstore. Then it became impossible to ignore. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the sky had broken open, unleashing a torrential downpour over the city. Olivia had ducked into a small, worn-down diner on the edge of the arts district to escape the rain. She ordered a black tea and sat in a corner booth, pulling her beige trench coat tighter around herself. That was when she saw her again. The bell above the diner door jingled, and a woman stepped inside, shaking the rain from her dark, messy hair. She was striking in a rugged, sharp-edged kind of way. She wore a scuffed black leather jacket, faded charcoal jeans, and heavy combat boots that thudded against the checkered linoleum floor. Her jawline was sharp enough to cut glass, and she had a small, silver ring pierced through her lower lip. Olivia's breath hitched. It was the same woman. The same dark, piercing eyes that she had seen across the street 3 days ago. The same woman who had been leaning against a brick wall outside her yoga studio on Monday. Panic should have been Olivia's first instinct. A normal woman would have reached for her phone, dialed the police, or at least called her husband. But as the stranger's dark eyes scanned the room and locked onto Olivia's, a sudden electric jolt shot down Olivia's spine. It wasn't fear. It was pure, unadulterated adrenaline. The woman didn't look away. Instead, a slow, incredibly arrogant smirk spread across her face. She walked straight toward Olivia's corner booth. "Is this seat taken?" the woman asked. Her voice was low, slightly raspy, and dripped with a terrifying amount of confidence. "There are about 10 empty booths in this diner," Olivia pointed out, trying to keep her voice steady. She gripped her teacup, her knuckles turning white. "I didn't ask about the other booths," the woman replied, sliding into the seat directly across from Olivia without waiting for an invitation. "I asked about this one." Close, she was even more intoxicating. She smelled like rain, dark roast coffee, and something inherently dangerous. Olivia felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks, a feeling she hadn't experienced since she was a reckless teenager. "Who are you?" Olivia asked, dropping the polite society facade she usually wore. "And why have you been following me for the past 5 days?" The woman chuckled, leaning back against the red vinyl of the booth. She crossed her arms, looking entirely too comfortable. "Following you? That's quite an ego you have there, princess. Has it ever occurred to you that maybe we just share the same exquisite taste in boring cafes and overly expensive yoga studios? I don't believe in coincidences, Olivia said sharply. Neither do I, the woman murmured, her dark eyes dropping momentarily to Olivia's lips before snapping back up to her eyes. The prolonged eye contact was heavy, thick with a tension that Olivia couldn't quite name. The name is Harper. Harper, Olivia repeated, the name feeling strange but pleasant on her tongue. Well, Harper. If you're going to stalk me, you could at least be a little more discreet. The leather jacket isn't exactly camouflage. Harper let out a genuine, throaty laugh. Noted. I'll wear neon pink next time. Help me blend in with the rich housewives. The insult was deliberate, a test to see how Olivia would react. Instead of getting angry, Olivia leaned forward, resting her elbows on the sticky table. I'm not a housewife. I'm a prisoner with a platinum credit card. The words spilled out before she could stop them. She shocked herself. She never spoke about her marriage to anyone, let alone a mysterious stranger who was probably dangerous. Harper's smirk faded slightly, replaced by a glint of genuine curiosity. For a brief second, the tough, bad girl exterior seemed to crack, revealing a sharp, analyzing mind. Well, Harper said softly, leaning in closer so the distance between their faces was barely a foot. If you know you're in a prison, why haven't you tried to pick the lock? Because the guards are very vigilant, Olivia whispered, the weight of her reality suddenly crashing down on her. Harper stared at her for a long, quiet moment. The diner around them seemed to fade away. The clatter of plates and the hiss of the espresso machine became distant background noise. There was a magnetic pull between them, something dark and dangerous that Olivia wanted to dive headfirst into. Suddenly, Harper's phone buzzed in her leather jacket pocket. The spell broke. Harper pulled the device out, glanced at the screen, and her expression instantly hardened. She typed a quick, sharp reply and shoved the phone away. I have to go, Harper said abruptly, sliding out of the booth. Wait, Olivia called out, standing up. Will I see you again? Harper paused at the door, turning back to look at Olivia. The rain was still pouring outside, casting long, dramatic shadows across her face. You're a smart girl, Olivia. If I were you, I'd stop looking into the shadows. You might not like what you find staring back. With that, Harper pushed the door open and disappeared into the gray, rain-soaked city. Olivia stood there, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. Harper knew her name. She had never introduced herself. The realization should have terrified her, but as she gathered her coat and walked out to her waiting town car, the only thing she could think about was how soon she could find the woman in the leather jacket again. That evening, the penthouse felt colder than usual. James was sitting in his leather armchair in his study, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon. He didn't look up when Olivia walked in. You were out late, James noted, his voice perfectly calm but carrying an underlying edge that made the hairs on Olivia's arms stand up. I got caught in the rain, Olivia replied evenly, pouring herself a glass of water at the wet bar. I waited it out at a diner. Alone? James asked, finally looking up. His eyes were cold, calculating. Of course, Olivia lied, turning to face him. She kept her face completely neutral, a skill she had perfected over 5 years of marriage. Who else would I be with? James studied her for a moment, taking a slow sip of his bourbon. No one, I suppose. I just worry about you, Olivia. The city is full of dangerous people. People who want to take advantage of what we have. People who pretend to be something they aren't. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Did he know? Was he warning her? I'll be careful, she managed to say. See that you are, James replied, turning his attention back to his paperwork. Oh, by the way, I've hired a new security consultant for the firm. She's supposed to be the best in the business at finding people's secrets. Her name is Harper. You might run into her around the building. The glass of water slipped from Olivia's fingers, shattering into a dozen pieces on the hardwood floor. James looked up, his brow furrowed in annoyance. "Clumsy tonight, aren't we?" "Sorry," Olivia choked out, dropping to her knees to pick up the jagged shards of glass. The sharp edges cut into her skin, but she barely felt the pain. Her mind was spinning, a chaotic storm of realization and horror. Harper. The woman with the leather jacket. The electric touch. The dark eyes. She wasn't just a stalker. She was on James's payroll. James had hired her to spy on his own wife. He was looking for a reason, an excuse, a secret. As a drop of blood welled up on Olivia's finger from the broken glass, a strange, dark smile slowly spread across her face. If James wanted to play a game, he was going to get one. And if Harper was the piece he was using on the board, Olivia was going to make sure she stole that piece for herself. End of Part 1. Part 2: The Hunter and the Prey. The bandage on Olivia's index finger throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache, a physical reminder of the shattered glass and the shattered illusion of her marriage. She sat at the long marble dining table, pushing a piece of perfectly poached egg around her gold-rimmed plate. Across from her, James was deep into a phone call, his voice a low, commanding rumble that used to make her feel safe, but now only made her skin crawl. He hung up, smoothing his immaculate silk tie. "I have back-to-back meetings today," James announced, not looking at her as he scrolled through his tablet. "I might be late. Don't wait up for dinner." "And Olivia?" She looked up, her expression a carefully constructed mask of passive devotion. "Yes, James. Don't go wandering into bad neighborhoods just to find a quaint coffee shop. Stick to the Upper East Side. We don't need any unnecessary risks." His words were framed as care, but Olivia could hear the invisible chains rattling. He wanted her predictable. He wanted her where his new security consultant could easily monitor her. "Of course, James," she murmured, offering him a hollow smile. "Have a good day at work." As the heavy oak door clicked shut behind him, the suffocating atmosphere in the penthouse instantly lifted. Olivia exhaled a shaky breath, her eyes darting to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Down there, somewhere in the sprawling concrete maze of the city, Harper was waiting. The woman with the leather jacket, the silver lip ring, and the arrogant smirk. The woman who was currently cashing James's checks to find a flaw in Olivia's perfect facade. A strange, intoxicating heat bloomed in Olivia's chest. For 5 years, she had played by James's rules. She had been the perfect, silent trophy wife. She had suppressed her own desires, her own personality, molding herself into whatever shape he demanded. But finding out about Harper didn't make her feel betrayed. It made her feel dangerously alive. If James wanted a show, she was going to give him an absolute masterpiece. Olivia walked into her massive walk-in closet, bypassing the pastel dresses, the beige trench coats, and the sensible flats. She reached into the very back, pulling out a garment bag she hadn't touched since before she met James. Inside was a sleek, form-fitting black turtleneck, a pair of dark, tight denim jeans, and black ankle boots with a sharp stiletto heel. She stripped off her silk robe and dressed quickly, feeling a surge of adrenaline with every button she fastened. She applied a bold, dark red lipstick, staring at her reflection. The docile housewife was gone. The woman staring back had a wicked, predatory gleam in her hazel eyes. She left the penthouse an hour later, bypassing her usual private town car and opting for the chaotic anonymity of the subway. She felt the shift in the air the moment she stepped onto the crowded sidewalk. Prickle on the back of her neck. The subtle weight of being watched. She didn't look over her shoulder. She didn't have to. She knew Harper was there, trailing her like a shadow. Olivia swiped her Metro card and descended into the stifling heat of the subway station, blending into the sea of commuters. She intentionally chose a train heading downtown, far away from her safe, sanitized neighborhood. She rode the rattling train for 40 minutes, watching the scenery shift from towering glass skyscrapers to graffiti-covered brick buildings and narrow, gritty streets. She finally stepped off at a station deep in the heart of the Lower East Side, a neighborhood James would actively shudder at. She walked with purpose, her heels clicking aggressively against the cracked pavement. She led her invisible shadow through a maze of narrow alleyways and crowded street markets, finally stopping in front of a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor. The neon sign above the door was buzzing loudly, half the letters burned out. The heavy scent of stale beer and cigarette smoke drifted out from the open doorway. It was the absolute last place the elegant wife of James Sterling should be. Olivia pushed the heavy wooden door open and stepped inside. It was dark, illuminated only by the glow of a jukebox in the corner and the low-hanging lamps over the worn billiards tables. Rough-looking men covered in tattoos and grease cast curious, lingering glances her way. She was completely out of place, a designer diamond dropped into a pile of coal. She walked straight to the sticky wooden bar and sat on a torn vinyl stool. "Whiskey," Olivia ordered, slamming a crisp $50 bill onto the counter. "Neat." The heavily bearded bartender raised an eyebrow but poured the amber liquid into a slightly cloudy glass. Olivia took a sip, the cheap alcohol burning delightfully down her throat. She stared at the mirror behind the bar, watching the reflection of the entrance. 3 minutes later, the door creaked open. Harper stepped inside, her silhouette framed by the harsh daylight of the street before the door swung shut. She was still wearing the signature leather jacket, but her usual arrogant swagger was replaced by a tense, alert posture. Her dark eyes immediately scanned the room, locking onto Olivia at the bar. For a split second, Olivia saw genuine confusion and a flicker of panic in Harper's eyes. This wasn't the art gallery. This wasn't the high-end yoga studio. Olivia was breaking the pattern. Harper began to make her way through the crowded bar, but before she could reach the counter, a large man with a heavily scarred face and a strong stench of cheap cologne slid into the empty stool right next to Olivia. "Well, well," the man slurred, leaning uncomfortably close. "You look like you took a wrong turn, sweetheart. Need some company?" Olivia didn't flinch. She took another slow sip of her whiskey, keeping her eyes glued to the mirror, watching Harper's rapid approach. "I'm perfectly fine alone," Olivia said coldly. "Come on," the man insisted, reaching out and wrapping a thick, grimy hand around Olivia's forearm. "Let me buy you a real drink." Before Olivia could pull her arm away, a hand shot out from behind her, gripping the man's wrist with terrifying, bone-crushing force. "The lady said she's fine," a low, raspy voice growled. Olivia turned her head. Harper was standing right behind her, her jaw clenched, her dark eyes blazing with a sudden, violent intensity. The air between them crackled with electricity. Harper twisted the man's wrist just enough to make him wince and release Olivia's arm. "Hey, back off, psycho," the man grunted, trying to yank his hand free, but Harper's grip was like an iron vice. "Walk away," Harper whispered, stepping closer to the man, her free hand resting casually near the waistband of her jeans, a silent but deadly threat. "Now." The man took one look at the cold, murderous look in Harper's eyes, swallowed hard, and scrambled off the stool, disappearing into the back of the bar. Harper exhaled a sharp breath, releasing her grip and turning her attention entirely to Olivia. The anger in her eyes was quickly replaced by a furious disbelief. "What the hell are you doing here?" Harper demanded, keeping her voice low but laced with pure venom. "Are you out of your mind? You could have gotten hurt." Olivia didn't back down. Instead, she swiveled her stool around, her knees brushing lightly against Harper's denim-clad legs. The physical contact sent a jolt of heat straight to Olivia's core, but she kept her face completely composed. "I wanted a drink," Olivia said smoothly, tilting her head. "And I got tired of the overpriced lattes on Fifth Avenue. So you come to a dive bar in the worst part of the city?" Harper ran a hand through her messy dark hair, visibly stressed. She leaned in closer, the scent of leather, rain, and mint washing over Olivia. "You don't belong here, princess. You need to go home." "Or what?" Olivia challenged, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. She leaned forward, closing the gap between them until their faces were mere inches apart. Are you going to write me up in your little report, Harper? Are you going to tell James that his perfect, obedient wife is drinking cheap whiskey with the locals? Harper froze. The breath hitched in her throat, her dark eyes widening in sheer shock. The noisy, chaotic bar around them seemed to instantly vanish, leaving only the heavy, suffocating tension between the two women. You? Harper started, her voice faltering for the first time. You know. I know my husband hired a security consultant, Olivia purred, reaching out and trailing one manicured fingernail slowly down the lapel of Harper's leather jacket. She felt Harper shiver under her touch. I know he hired you to spy on me. To dig up my dirty little secrets. Harper's jaw tightened, her eyes dropping to Olivia's dark red lips before snapping back to her hazel eyes. Tough, untouchable bad girl was suddenly backed into a corner, completely off balance. If you know who I am and you know who's paying me, why the hell did you lead me here? Why are you playing this game? Olivia smiled, a slow, predatory curve of her lips. She stepped off the bar stool, crowding directly into Harper's personal space. She looked up through her lashes, letting the raw, unfiltered desire she had been burying for years finally rise to the surface. Because Harper, Olivia whispered softly, her breath ghosting across Harper's silver lip ring. If James wants you to find out my darkest, deepest secrets, I figured I should give you one worth finding. Harper stared at her, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The professional boundaries, the paycheck, the rules, they were all melting away under the intense, burning heat of Olivia's gaze. For a long, agonizing moment, neither of them moved, caught in a dangerous, thrilling trap of their own making. Cat had finally caught the mouse, but in the dim light of the gritty dive bar, it was impossible to tell who was truly the prey. End of Part 2. Part 3, Blurred Boundaries. The silence between them in the dim, smoky bar was deafening. Harper's hand stayed frozen on the lapel of her leather jacket, right where Olivia's manicured fingers had left a trailing path of fire. For a professional tracker, someone who prided herself on never letting a target see her coming, Harper looked completely blindsided. The confident, mocking smirk she usually wore had completely vanished, replaced by a tense, heavy breathing that betrayed how deeply Olivia's words had shaken her. You think this is a game, don't you? Harper finally spoke, her voice dropping to a harsh, dangerous whisper. She suddenly gripped Olivia's wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but with a fierce intensity that made Olivia's breath catch in her throat. You think because you're rich and bored you can play with fire and not get burned? I've been freezing to death for 5 years, Harper, Olivia replied, her voice remarkably steady despite the frantic pounding of her heart. She didn't pull away from Harper's grip. Instead, she leaned in even closer, her hazel eyes locking onto Harper's dark ones with unyielding defiance. A little fire sounds exactly like what I need. Harper stared at her, her jaw working as she fought against whatever internal battle was raging inside her head. Finally, she let out a sharp, frustrated breath and released Olivia's wrist. We're leaving. Now. Before Olivia could protest, Harper grabbed her by the sleeve of her black turtleneck and pulled her toward the back exit of the bar. They stepped out into a narrow, dimly lit alleyway. The rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and reflecting the amber glow of the streetlights. The air was cool, shocking Olivia's skin after the stifling heat of the dive bar. Harper slammed the heavy metal door shut behind them, cutting off the low rumble of the jukebox. She turned on Olivia, pinning her against the damp brick wall of the alley. She didn't touch her, but she came so close that Olivia could feel the heat radiating from Harper's body. Harper placed one hand on the brick next to Olivia's head, effectively trapping her. Listen to me very carefully, Princess, Harper growled, her dark eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and something much more intoxicating. Your husband isn't just a jealous guy checking your text messages. James Sterling is a dangerous, ruthless man. If he even suspects that I'm not doing my job or worse that you're on to him, he won't just divorce you. He will ruin you. He will strip away everything you have, ensure you never get a job in this city, and make your life a living hell. Do you understand me? Olivia looked at the woman towering over her, She saw the genuine concern buried beneath Harper's fierce exterior. It was the first time in years someone had looked at her and cared about her safety, rather than what she could do for their social status. "Let him try," Olivia whispered, a fierce, reckless smile breaking across her face. "He already took my freedom. He already took my youth. He has nothing left to take that I actually care about." She reached up, her hand gently brushing against Harper's sharp jawline, her thumb lightly grazing the silver ring on Harper's lower lip. Harper violently shuddered at the touch, her eyes dropping to Olivia's dark red lips. "Unless you're afraid you won't be able to handle me, Harper." "You are a nightmare," Harper groaned, but she didn't pull away from Olivia's touch. For a terrifying, beautiful second, Olivia thought Harper was going to lean in and kiss her. Tension between them was stretched so thin it felt like it would snap at any moment. Harper's eyes darkened with raw, unfiltered desire, a look that made Olivia's knees go weak. But with a massive effort of willpower, Harper snapped her head back and stepped away, running both hands through her messy dark hair. "Jesus Christ," she muttered to herself, pacing the narrow alley. "I'm supposed to be a professional." "You can still be a professional," Olivia said, smoothing down her black turtleneck as she stepped away from the wall. "Just tell James whatever he wants to hear. Tell him I went to the market, bought some flowers, and came home. Keep cashing his checks. And in the meantime..." Harper stopped pacing, turning to look at Olivia through the shadows of the alley. "In the meantime, what?" "In the meantime, you keep watching me," Olivia said softly, her voice carrying a promise that made the air between them feel heavy again. Harper let out a hollow, defeated laugh. She walked over to a heavy, sleek black motorcycle parked at the end of the alley. She grabbed a spare helmet hanging from the handlebars and tossed it to Olivia. Olivia caught it, looking at it in surprise. "Get on," Harper ordered, swinging her long leg over the leather seat of the bike. "If I leave you out here, you're going to get yourself killed, and then I definitely don't get paid." Olivia smiled, slipping the heavy helmet over her head and securing the strap. She walked over to the motorcycle and climbed onto the back. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of where to put her hands. "Hold on to me," Harper said, her voice muffled slightly by her own helmet. "Unless you want to fly off the back when I hit the gas." Olivia didn't hesitate a second time. She wrapped her arms tightly around Harper's slender waist, pressing her chest flush against Harper's back. She felt the sudden, sharp intake of Harper's breath through the leather jacket. A moment later, Harper kicked the engine to life. The heavy machine roared, vibrating beneath them, a powerful rumble that Olivia felt straight in her chest. They tore out of the alleyway and into the neon-lit streets of Chicago. Olivia closed her eyes, burying her face into the crook of Harper's neck. The wind whipped past them, the city blurring into a streak of bright lights. Holding on to Harper, feeling the strength of the woman beneath her hands, Olivia felt a sense of pure, unadulterated freedom she hadn't felt in a lifetime. She didn't want the ride to end. Too soon, Harper slowed the motorcycle down, pulling into a quiet, tree-lined street 2 blocks away from Olivia's luxury penthouse building. She cut the engine, and the sudden silence of the night enveloped them. Olivia reluctantly unwrapped her arms from Harper's waist and climbed off the bike, taking off the helmet. Her hair was beautifully messy from the wind, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She handed the helmet back to Harper. Harper took it, but before Olivia could turn to leave, Harper grabbed Olivia's hand. She pressed something small, cold, and metallic into Olivia's palm, folding Olivia's fingers over it. "Don't use your regular phone," Harper said, her voice serious, her dark eyes intensely focused on Olivia's face. "James monitors the billing accounts. If you want to find me again, use that. It's a burner. My number is already programmed into it." Olivia looked down at her closed fist, a thrill of excitement rushing through her. She looked back up at Harper. "Thank you, Harper." "Don't thank me yet, princess," Harper murmured, her eyes lingering on Olivia for one last heavy moment. "I still haven't decided if I'm saving you or destroying you." With that, Harper started the engine and sped away into the night, leaving Olivia standing on the dark sidewalk, clutching the secret phone tightly in her hand. When Olivia walked into the penthouse, the air was just as cold and suffocating as she remembered. She quickly hid the burner phone in a secret pocket inside her purse before walking into the living room. James was standing by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand. He turned around as she entered, his eyes scanning her up and down. He noticed the slight flush in her cheeks, the wild state of her hair. "You look flushed," James remarked, his voice dropping to that icy, interrogative tone. "Where have you been, Olivia? Your town car driver said you never called him." Olivia took a slow, deep breath, channeling every ounce of acting ability she possessed. She forced a tired, slightly exasperated sigh. "I told you, James, I wanted some fresh air. I walked through the arts district, got caught up looking at some galleries, and took a cab home. My phone died, so I couldn't call the driver." James stared at her, his cold eyes searching her face for any sign of a lie. The silence stretched between them, thick with suspicion. Suddenly, the phone on James's desk buzzed. He walked over, picking it up and looking at the screen. A small, smug smile touched his lips. "Ah, speak of the devil. My new security consultant just sent over her first daily tracking report on you." Olivia's heart stopped. She stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat as James scrolled through the message on his screen. Had Harper betrayed her? Had it all been a trap to get her to confess, to catch her in a lie? James let out a short, mocking chuckle, tossing the phone onto his desk. "Well, it seems you're telling the truth for once. Harper says she tracked you to a couple of boring cafes, a street market, and watched you take a yellow cab back uptown. She notes that your routine is entirely pathetic and uninspired." James looked at Olivia, a look of profound superiority in his eyes. "She thinks you're completely harmless, Olivia. Just another bored housewife with nothing better to do." Olivia let out the breath she had been holding, a wave of intense relief washing over her, quickly followed by a dark, secret thrill. Harper had lied for her. She had covered her tracks. The dangerous alliance was officially sealed. "I told you, James," Olivia said softly, keeping her voice meek and submissive. "I have nothing to hide." "Good," James said, turning his back on her. "Go to bed. I have work to do." Olivia walked down the long hallway to her bedroom, closing the door behind her. In the privacy of the dark room, she pulled the burner phone out of her purse. She crawled into the massive, lonely bed, her heart racing as she stared at the small screen. The phone vibrated in her hand. Text message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You're a terrible liar, Sterling. But you look good on the back of my bike. Sleep well, princess." Olivia clutched the phone to her chest, a wide, genuine smile spreading across her face in the dark. The game had officially changed, and for the first time Olivia was playing to win. End of Part 3. Part 4, The Velvet Chokehold. The emerald green silk of Olivia's evening gown felt less like clothing and more like a beautifully tailored straitjacket. She stood in front of the massive gilded mirror in the penthouse dressing room, her face an unreadable mask as James stood behind her, fastening a heavy, terrifyingly expensive diamond necklace around her throat. Cold metal of the clasp pinched the sensitive skin at the nape of her neck, sending a subtle shiver down her spine. It was Friday night, which meant it was the annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala. It was James's favorite night of the year, the night he got to parade his wealth, his influence, and his perfect, silent wife in front of Chicago's elite. "Stand up straight, Olivia," James murmured, his hands lingering heavily on her bare shoulders. He met her gaze in the mirror, his eyes dark and calculating. "You represent me tonight. I don't want you looking tired or distracted. The mayor will be at our table, and I need you to be charming, not mute." "I will be whatever you need me to be, James," Olivia replied smoothly, reciting the line she had perfected over the last half-decade. "See that you are," he said, giving her shoulder a squeeze that was just slightly too tight to be affectionate before turning and walking out of the dressing room. As soon as he was gone, Olivia let out a trembling breath. She reached down, her fingers brushing against the cold, hard outline of the burner phone hidden safely inside her sleek, black velvet clutch. She had spent the last 3 days staring at that phone. She hadn't sent a single message. Harper hadn't sent one either. It was a terrifying game of chicken, a silent test of endurance to see who would break first. Every time Olivia closed her eyes, all she could see were Harper's dark, intense eyes and the harsh neon light of the dive bar illuminating her sharp jawline. It was driving her insane. An hour later, they arrived at the Waldorf Astoria. The grand ballroom was a blinding sea of flashing cameras, crystal chandeliers, and forced laughter. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos glided through the crowd carrying silver trays of champagne, while the city's wealthiest power brokers traded secrets and favors behind polite smiles. Olivia played her part flawlessly. She laughed at the mayor's dry jokes, she nodded in agreement with the condescending wives of James's business partners, and she allowed James to keep his hand firmly planted on the small of her back, a constant physical reminder of who owned her. But beneath her calm, elegant exterior, a frantic energy was clawing at her ribs. The air in the ballroom felt impossibly thin. The noise was a deafening, chaotic buzz that made her head pound. By 11 o'clock, she couldn't take it anymore. "I need to powder my nose," Olivia whispered to James during a lull in the conversation. James didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on a rival developer across the room. "5 minutes, Olivia. They are bringing out the main course soon." Olivia didn't wait for his permission. She slipped away from the table, navigating her way through the dense crowd of silk and tuxedos until she reached the heavy mahogany doors that led out to the private wraparound terrace. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the cool, biting night air. Terrace was dimly lit and mercifully empty, offering a breathtaking, dizzying view of the city lights sprawling out below. Olivia walked to the stone balustrade, gripping the cold stone tightly as she sucked in deep, desperate breaths of the crisp air. Her hands were shaking. She opened her velvet clutch and pulled out the cheap plastic burner phone. The screen cast a pale, bluish glow on her face. Before she could lose her nerve, she typed out a message. "I am suffocating." She hit send. Her heart hammered a chaotic rhythm against her ribs. She stared at the screen, watching the little delivery checkmark appear. 1 minute passed. Then 2. The silence of the terrace was broken only by the distant wail of a police siren miles below. She was just about to put the phone away, convinced she had made a terrible, foolish mistake, when a shadow detached itself from the darkest corner of the terrace. "You really need to stop wandering off alone in expensive dresses, princess. It's bad for my blood pressure." Olivia spun around, a startled gasp escaping her lips. Harper stepped into the pale moonlight, and Olivia's breath completely hitched in her throat. Gone was the scuffed leather jacket and the faded combat boots. Tonight, Harper was wearing a sharply tailored, entirely black suit that hugged her lean frame perfectly. Crisp black button-down shirt was left unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the smooth skin of her throat. Her dark hair was slicked back, giving her an impossibly sleek, dangerous edge. The silver ring on her lip caught the moonlight, drawing Olivia's eyes directly to her mouth. She looked like a highly paid assassin, and she looked utterly devastating. "What are you doing here?" Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible over the roaring in her ears. "How did you get past security?" Harper walked slowly toward her, an arrogant, lazy smirk playing on her lips. "I am the security, Olivia. James gave me full clearance to sweep the perimeter. He wants to make sure no one is taking photos of his prized possession without his permission." The casual mention of James owning her made Olivia's blood boil. "I am not his possession." "Could have fooled me," Harper noted, her eyes dropping to the heavy diamond necklace around Olivia's throat. "He certainly collars you like one." The raw, unfiltered honesty of the comment hit Olivia like a physical blow. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step toward Harper, closing the distance between them. The scent of Harper's cologne, something dark, woody, and utterly intoxicating, mixed with the sharp chill of the night air. I texted you because I needed to breathe, Olivia said, her voice dropping to a fierce, trembling whisper. And right now, you are the only real thing in this entire miserable city. Harper's smirk vanished instantly. The arrogant swagger evaporated, replaced by a sudden, dangerous intensity. She stepped completely into Olivia's personal space, forcing Olivia to back up until her spine hit the stone balustrade. Harper planted both hands on the stone railing, one on either side of Olivia, effectively trapping her there. The heat radiating from Harper's body was a stark, burning contrast to the freezing night air. You're playing a very dangerous game, Olivia, Harper breathed, her face inches from Olivia's. Her dark eyes were entirely consumed by a dark, ravenous hunger. I am not a good person. I lie for a living. I ruin people for a living. I am exactly the kind of monster your husband warned you about. I don't care, Olivia whispered back, her chest rising and falling rapidly, brushing against the lapels of Harper's black suit. She reached up, her trembling fingers lightly tracing the sharp angle of Harper's jaw. I'm so tired of being safe. I'm so tired of being good. A violent shudder ripped through Harper's frame at the touch. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, fighting a losing battle against her own restraint. Olivia! Harper groaned, the sound raw and desperate. Kiss me, Olivia demanded. It wasn't a request. It was an absolute, shattering command. Harper's control snapped. She moved with terrifying, beautiful speed. Her hand tangled fiercely in the hair at the back of Olivia's head, tilting her head back, and her mouth crashed down onto Olivia's. Kiss was explosive, tasting of champagne, danger, and years of suppressed, agonizing desire. It wasn't soft or hesitant, it was deeply possessive and desperately bruising. Olivia let out a soft moan into Harper's mouth, wrapping her arms around Harper's neck, pulling her impossibly closer. The world around them, the glittering gala, the suffocating marriage, the millions of dollars in the bank account, completely burned away, leaving only the intoxicating heat of Harper's lips and the iron grip of her hand in Olivia's hair. Harper pushed her flush against the stone railing, her tongue sliding past Olivia's lips, deepening the kiss until Olivia's knees completely gave out, entirely reliant on Harper's strength to keep her standing. It was a chaotic, beautiful collision, a silent promise of destruction that neither of them wanted to survive. Olivia! The sharp, echoing sound of the heavy terrace doors opening shattered the silence like a gunshot. Harper ripped herself away from Olivia with lightning speed, stepping back into the deep shadows just a fraction of a second before James stepped out onto the terrace. Olivia spun around to face the doors, her heart hammering so violently she thought her chest might crack open. Her lips were swollen and stinging, her breathing heavy and ragged. She quickly smoothed down the silk of her dress, desperately trying to arrange her features into her usual blank mask of perfection. There you are, James barked, his eyes narrowing as he stalked toward her. He stopped a few feet away, his cold gaze sweeping over her flushed face and heaving chest. You've been gone for 10 minutes. The main course is served. What the hell are you doing out here in the freezing cold? I just needed some air, James, Olivia managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. I felt a little faint. James stared at her, his eyes drifting suspiciously to the dark corners of the terrace. The silence stretched out, agonizing and thick. For a terrifying second, Olivia thought he could smell Harper's cologne on her skin, or see the lingering heat of the kiss burned onto her lips. You look a mess, James said finally, his voice dripping with disgust. He reached out and roughly adjusted the diamond necklace on her throat. Fix your hair. You look like a streetwalker. Come back inside immediately. He turned on his heel and walked back into the ballroom, the heavy doors slamming shut behind him. Olivia stood frozen, trying to catch her breath. Slowly, she turned her head toward the shadows where Harper had been standing. Corner was empty. Harper was gone. Olivia reached up, lightly touching her bruised, swollen lips. A slow, wicked smile spread across her face, completely transforming her delicate features. The docile, obedient wife of James Sterling had just died on this balcony. The woman walking back into the ballroom tonight was someone entirely different. The cage door was finally open, and Olivia was ready to burn the entire house down. End of Part 4. Part 5, The Trap and the Truth. The interior of the private town car was dead silent, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the tires against the wet asphalt. Olivia sat as close to the passenger door as physically possible, staring blankly out the tinted window at the passing city lights. Next to her, James was scrolling through emails on his phone, the pale blue light illuminating his sharp, emotionless features. To the outside observer, they were the perfect, elite couple returning from a triumphant evening. But beneath the emerald silk of Olivia's gown, her skin was still buzzing with an electric, chaotic energy. She could still taste the sharp tang of champagne and dark cologne on her tongue. She could still feel the phantom pressure of Harper's hand twisted in her hair, pulling her into the beautiful oblivion of that shadow-drenched balcony. "The mayor was impressed," James said suddenly, not looking up from his screen. "You handled the conversation about the waterfront development well. I'll admit I was concerned when you vanished for so long, but you managed to pull yourself together." Olivia didn't blink. She kept her gaze fixed on the blurred street lamps. "I told you I just needed some air." The ballroom was stifling. "Well, whatever it was, don't make a habit of it," James replied, snapping his phone shut and finally turning to look at her. His eyes dropped to her lips, and for a terrifying, heart-stopping second, Olivia thought he noticed they were slightly swollen. But he simply reached out, his cold fingers brushing against the heavy diamond necklace resting against her collarbone. "I need you focused, Olivia. Things at the firm are going to be moving very quickly over the next few weeks. I have a business trip this weekend. I'm leaving for Aspen tomorrow morning. I need to inspect a new resort property." Olivia's breath hitched, but she forced her face to remain perfectly neutral. "Aspen? A whole weekend? How long will you be gone?" "I'll be back late Sunday night," James stated, withdrawing his hand. "I expect you to stay in the penthouse. Catch up on your reading. Don't go wandering off to the Lower East Side again. I don't want Harper to have to scrape you off the pavement." The mention of Harper's name sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline straight to Olivia's core. "Of course, James. Have a safe trip." The rest of the night passed in a blur of agonizing restraint. Olivia laid awake in their massive, cold bed, listening to the steady, even rhythm of James's breathing beside her. Every second felt like an hour. She clutched the edge of the mattress, fighting the overwhelming urge to pull the burner phone from her purse and text Harper. But she knew the rules of the game now. She couldn't afford a single misstep. When the sun finally rose, casting a pale gray light over the Chicago skyline, James was already dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his leather duffel bag packed and waiting by the door. He gave Olivia a perfunctory kiss on the cheek, a dry, loveless press of lips, and walked out the door without looking back. The moment the heavy deadbolt clicked shut, the penthouse transformed. The suffocating pressure instantly vanished, leaving behind a sprawling, empty playground. Olivia didn't waste a single second. She threw off the heavy silk duvet, sprinting to the walk-in closet. She bypassed everything James had ever bought her. She pulled on a pair of faded black jeans, a simple white t-shirt, and a dark, oversized hoodie that swallowed her frame. She tied her hair up in a messy knot, grabbed her sunglasses, and finally retrieved the cheap plastic burner phone from her clutch. Her fingers flew across the keypad. "He's gone until Sunday. Where are you?" She barely had time to walk into the kitchen before the phone buzzed violently in her hand. "Dress attached. Take the subway. Change trains twice. Make sure absolutely no one is watching you. If you think you're being followed, abort and go home." Olivia stared at the address. It was in an industrial sector of Brooklyn, miles away from the manicured streets she was used to. A slow, reckless smile spread across her face. The journey took over an hour. Olivia followed Harper's instructions with paranoid precision, stepping onto trains just as the doors closed, watching the reflections in the subway windows and taking a chaotic, winding route through the city. When she finally emerged above ground, the air smelled of salt, rusted metal, and damp concrete. The address led her to a massive, abandoned-looking warehouse complex near the docks. There were no signs, no doormen, just rows of heavily reinforced steel doors set into weather-beaten brick walls. Olivia walked up to the door marked Unit 4B and knocked twice. The heavy steel door swung open immediately, and a hand reached out, grabbing her by the wrist and yanking her inside. The door slammed shut behind her, the heavy deadbolt sliding into place with a loud metallic clack. Olivia stumbled forward, blinking furiously as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. She found herself standing in a massive, sprawling loft. The walls were exposed brick, the floors scuffed concrete. There was a wall of computer monitors glowing with lines of code, a heavy punching bag hanging from a steel beam, and a chaotic array of files scattered across a massive drafting table. It was a space designed for a ghost, someone who lived entirely in the shadows. Harper was standing a few feet away, running a hand aggressively through her dark, messy hair. She looked entirely different from the sharply dressed assassin at the gala. She was wearing a loose gray tank top that revealed a canvas of intricate dark tattoos snaking up her muscular arms and low-slung sweatpants. She looked exhausted, ragged, and entirely on edge. "You shouldn't have come," Harper muttered, turning away from Olivia and pacing the length of the room. "This is a mistake. Last night was a massive, catastrophic mistake." Olivia pushed her sunglasses up onto her head, her hazel eyes locking onto Harper's pacing form. "It didn't feel like a mistake when you had me pinned against that balcony." Harper stopped dead in her tracks. She let out a harsh, bitter laugh, turning back to face Olivia. "You think this is a joke, Olivia? You think we're starring in some romantic thriller? You don't know anything about the world you're stepping into right now." "Then tell me," Olivia challenged, stepping deeper into the loft. She wasn't afraid. The anger and the fear had burned away completely, leaving only a fierce, unyielding determination. "Tell me what I don't know, Harper. Because all I know is that my husband is paying you to ruin my life, and last night you kissed me like you wanted to ruin it yourself." Harper stared at her, her jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked rapidly in her cheek. For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound in the massive loft was the hum of the computer servers. Then Harper let out a defeated sigh. She walked over to the drafting table, picked up a thick, unmarked manila folder, and tossed it onto the concrete floor between them. "Pick it up," Harper ordered, her voice devoid of its usual arrogant swagger. Olivia frowned, stepping forward and kneeling to pick up the folder. She opened it, her eyes scanning the dense stacks of financial documents, bank statements, and legal contracts inside. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What is this?" "That is the real James Sterling," Harper said, crossing her arms over her chest. "I didn't just investigate you, Olivia. I dug into his accounts, his offshore holdings. The firm is bleeding money. He's made terrible investments, and he's heavily leveraged. He is drowning in millions of dollars of debt, and the board is about to find out." Olivia looked up, shock rippling through her. "James? Drowning in debt? But he has everything." "It's a house of cards," Harper corrected sharply. "And it's about to collapse. Which brings us to you." Harper walked closer, the scent of her dark cologne washing over Olivia, instantly bringing back the dizzying memory of the gala. Harper knelt down so they were at eye level. "Your prenuptial agreement," Harper said softly, her dark eyes entirely serious. "I read it. If James files for divorce, you are entitled to half of his remaining liquid assets, which he desperately needs to stay afloat. But there's a morality clause. If he can prove that you were unfaithful, if he can prove infidelity or scandalous behavior that damages his public image, the prenup is voided. You walk away with absolutely nothing, and he gets to play the victim to the press, using your scandal to distract the board from his financial crimes. The documents in Olivia's hands suddenly felt like they were coated in poison. The truth hit her with the force of a freight train. The suffocating control, the sudden paranoia, the hiring of a security consultant. It wasn't about jealousy. It was never about love or protection. It was a calculated, cold-blooded business strategy. "He hired you to catch me cheating," Olivia whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Worse," Harper corrected, her voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. She reached out, her fingers gently wrapping around Olivia's wrist. "He knew you were too obedient to just cheat on a whim. He hired me to push you into it, to manufacture a situation where you looked guilty. He wanted me to set a trap, photograph you in a compromising position, and hand him the evidence he needs to destroy you." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the loft. Olivia stared into Harper's dark, intense eyes. The woman kneeling in front of her was supposed to be the executioner. She was supposed to be the final nail in Olivia's coffin. "So why didn't you?" Olivia asked, her voice dangerously calm, the realization sparking a dark, dangerous fire in her chest. "You had me in the dive bar. You had me on the back of your motorcycle. You definitely had me on that balcony last night. You could have snapped a photo and collected your paycheck. Why didn't you ruin me, Harper?" Harper's gaze dropped to Olivia's lips, her breathing suddenly turning ragged and shallow. The professional boundaries, the logic, the danger, it was all disintegrating under the heavy magnetic pull between them. "Because," Harper breathed, her thumb lightly tracing the delicate veins on Olivia's wrist, "I have a terrible habit of breaking my own rules. And from the moment I saw you in that diner, I knew I was going to burn my own career to the ground just to see you smile." Olivia didn't hesitate. She dropped the folder, the papers scattering across the cold concrete floor. She surged forward, grabbing the collar of Harper's tank top and pulling her in. Kiss was entirely different from the night before. There was no desperate rush, no fear of being caught. It was deep, agonizingly slow, and heavy with the weight of the massive secret they now shared. Harper let out a low groan, her hands wrapping firmly around Olivia's waist, pulling her flush against her body. Olivia parted her lips, letting Harper completely take over, tasting the dark, bitter truth of their reality. They were both in the cage now. James had set the trap perfectly, intending to sacrifice his perfect wife to save his empire. But as Harper's hands roamed fiercely over Olivia's back, and Olivia tangled her fingers deeply into Harper's dark hair, a terrifying, beautiful realization washed over Olivia. James had given her the very weapon she was going to use to destroy him. End of Part 5. Part 6, The Architect of Ruin. When they finally broke apart, the silence in the sprawling, shadowy loft was entirely different. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of the penthouse, nor the tense, combative quiet of the dive bar. It was a breathless, electrified stillness, the kind of silence that follows a massive explosion. Harper rested her forehead against Olivia's, her breathing ragged and uneven. Her hands were still gripped tightly around Olivia's waist, holding her close as if she were afraid the elegant woman in her arms might suddenly vanish into thin air. Olivia kept her eyes closed for a long moment, savoring the absolute grounding reality of Harper's heartbeat thudding against her own chest. Beneath their feet, the scattered financial documents detailing James's impending ruin lay completely ignored. "If we do this," Harper murmured, her voice a rough, gravelly whisper that sent a fresh shiver down Olivia's spine, "there is no going back, Olivia. If James even catches a scent that we're working together, he will crush us both. He has judges in his pocket. He has a legion of lawyers. He will make sure you are left with nothing, and he will make sure I end up in a concrete cell." Olivia slowly opened her eyes. The hazel depths that used to hold only passive obedience were now burning with a cold, calcified resolve. She reached up, gently untangling a stray lock of dark hair from Harper's silver lip ring. "I already have nothing, Harper," Olivia said, her voice eerily calm. "I have a closet full of clothes I hate, a title that feels like a collar, and a husband who wants to serve me up on a silver platter to save his own miserable skin. I'm not afraid of losing the cage. I'm only interested in how we tear it down. Harper stared at her, a slow, brilliant smirk spreading across her face. The raw, unfiltered audacity radiating from Olivia was utterly intoxicating. You really are a nightmare, princess. I completely underestimated you. Everyone does, Olivia replied smoothly, stepping back just enough to break the magnetic hold of Harper's body. She looked down at the scattered papers, then back up to the glowing wall of computer monitors. So, show me everything. If James wants a scandal, we'll give him one. But we are going to make sure he's the one who burns. Harper nodded, the professional, sharp-edged security consultant immediately taking over. She walked over to the massive drafting table, grabbing a pair of black-rimmed glasses and sliding them onto her face. The simple accessory somehow made her look even more dangerously attractive. Come here, Harper instructed, dropping into a rolling leather chair in front of the monitors. Olivia walked over, standing close behind Harper's chair, resting one hand lightly on the back of it. The screens were filled with labyrinthine lines of code, offshore banking logs, and encrypted emails. For the last 3 months, James has been bleeding his own company dry, Harper explained, her fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard with blistering speed. He made a massive gamble on a commercial development in Dubai, and it completely tanked. The board of directors at Sterling firm doesn't know yet. The audit is scheduled for next month. When they see the books, James is looking at federal fraud charges. Unless he can create a massive distraction, Olivia realized, the pieces of the puzzle locking perfectly into place. A messy, highly publicized divorce. A cheating scandal that completely dominates the tabloids and buys him time to manipulate the numbers or declare personal bankruptcy while shifting the blame. Exactly, Harper said, pulling up a new window. Displayed a complex web of shell companies. But he's not just buying time. He's hoarding cash. He's been funneling the last of the firm's liquid assets into an untraceable, encrypted offshore account in the Caymans. It's his golden parachute. If the firm goes down, he plans to let it burn, divorce you, leave you with his debts, and disappear with $80 million. Olivia felt a wave of nausea, quickly overpowered by a surge of pure, venomous anger. She had slept next to this man. She had attended his galas, smiled for his cameras, and sacrificed her own identity to build his empire. All while he was systematically digging her grave. Can you hack the account? Olivia asked, her voice tight. Can you take the money? Harper leaned back in her chair, sighing heavily. She reached up, rubbing the bridge of her nose. No. Cayman account is heavily encrypted. It's a closed-loop system. The only way to authorize a transfer out of that account is with a physical biometric security ledger. A hardware wallet. Without it, that $80 million is just a ghost in the machine. Even I can't break into it remotely. Olivia's mind raced. The synapses firing in her brain felt sharper, clearer than they had in years. She closed her eyes, mentally walking through the massive, suffocating layout of the penthouse. The marble floors, the cold glass, the private study James never let her enter without permission. The painting, Olivia whispered, her eyes flying open. Harper spun the chair around to look at her. What? The portrait of his grandfather in his private study, Olivia said, her heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm against her ribs. There's a hidden wall safe behind it. He thinks I don't know about it, but I caught him opening it once, years ago. It requires a retinal scan and a 12-digit alphanumeric passcode. Harper's eyes widened. Olivia, do you know the passcode? No, Olivia admitted, shaking her head. But I know James. He is pathologically obsessed with his own legacy. The date the Sterling firm was founded, combined with the initials of his first massive acquisition. I can guess it. I know I can. Guessing isn't good enough, Harper warned, standing up and closing the distance between them. If you input the wrong code 3 times, it triggers a silent alarm directly to his private security team. And the retinal scan? You can't fake that. I don't need to fake it, Olivia countered, stepping directly into Harper's space, entirely unbothered by the warning. James's security system is integrated into the Penthouse's smart home mainframe. You're the top security consultant in his employ. You have backdoor access to his servers, don't you? You can override the retinal lock remotely. Harper stared down at her, a mixture of awe and absolute terror swimming in her dark eyes. Overriding a biometric lock on a closed system takes time, Olivia. I'd have to blind the internal cameras, loop the security feed, and hack the safe's mainframe in real time while you stand there in his study. If his security team notices the feed loop, they will be at the penthouse in under 4 minutes. Then we do it in 3, Olivia said fiercely. Harper let out a long, ragged breath. She reached out, her hands gently resting on Olivia's waist. The touch was grounding, a sudden anchor in the middle of a raging storm. You are talking about stealing $80 million from one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. If we get caught, there is no lawyer who can save us. This is felony corporate espionage and grand larceny. Harper, Olivia whispered, stepping closer until their bodies were pressed together. She tilted her head up, her lips mere inches from Harper's silver ring. Are you in or are you out? Harper's gaze dropped to Olivia's lips, the internal debate completely dying in her eyes. I've been in since the moment you walked into that dive bar. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of frantic, highly coordinated planning. The massive loft transformed into a war room. They ordered cheap, greasy Chinese takeout, eating straight from the cartons as Harper mapped out the digital architecture of the penthouse security system. For the first time in her adult life, Olivia felt entirely, unapologetically happy. Sitting on the concrete floor in Harper's oversized spare hoodie, eating cold noodles, she felt richer than she ever had wearing James's diamonds. As the sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows across the warehouse, the frantic energy slowly gave way to a quiet, intimate exhaustion. Harper sat on the edge of the worn leather sofa, pulling Olivia between her knees. She gently wrapped her heavily tattooed arms around Olivia's waist from behind, resting her chin on Olivia's shoulder as they stared at the glowing lines of code on the main monitor. Why do you hate him so much? Olivia asked softly, leaning her head back against Harper's shoulder. Before you met me. Why did you take the job to spy on me? Harper was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the servers. My father was a man like James, Harper finally said, her voice devoid of emotion, though Olivia could feel the slight tightening of her muscles. Rich, powerful, completely untouchable. He destroyed my mother, stripped her of everything, took custody of my little brother, and left her with nothing but a shattered reputation. I promised myself I would learn how men like that operate. I learned their systems, their security, their secrets. I took the job with James because he paid well, and I enjoy watching empires crumble from the inside. Harper turned her head, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the side of Olivia's neck. I just didn't expect to find you locked inside. Olivia closed her eyes, melting into the touch. We're getting out. Both of us. Suddenly, a piercing, high-pitched alarm shattered the quiet intimacy of the loft. Harper practically leaped off the sofa, surging toward the main computer console. The screen was flashing a brilliant, angry red. What is it? Olivia asked, the adrenaline instantly flooding back into her veins. She rushed to Harper's side. Harper's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up a live GPS tracking map. A small, pulsing red dot was moving rapidly across the digital grid of Chicago. It's a tracker, Harper said, her voice tight with panic. A military-grade GPS bug. On me? Olivia asked, stepping back in horror, instinctively patting down her jeans and the hoodie. I didn't bring anything. I left my purse, my phone, my jewelry at the penthouse. Not on you, Harper said, her dark eyes locking onto the small, cheap plastic burner phone sitting on the edge of the drafting table. On the burner. But you gave me that phone, Olivia said, confusion twisting her features. You said it was clean. It was clean, Harper growled, rapidly typing commands to kill the signal, but the red dot kept pulsing. James didn't go to Aspen. The flight manifest was a decoy. He stayed in the city. He must have found the phone in your belongings before he left this morning, cloned the SIM, planted a micro-tracker in the casing, and put it back. The color completely drained from Olivia's face. James knew. He knew about the phone. He knew she had left the apartment. Where is the signal coming from right now? Olivia asked, her voice shaking. Harper looked at the screen, her jaw clenching so hard it looked like it might snap. Pulsing red dot wasn't just moving. It was moving toward Brooklyn. He's 3 miles away, Harper said, turning to look at Olivia, the raw panic finally breaking through her tough exterior. He tracked the phone here, Olivia. He's coming to the warehouse. The game of chess was over. James had just kicked over the board. We have to move, Harper ordered, grabbing her leather jacket from the back of the chair and tossing Olivia her shoes. Now. End of Part 6. Part 7, The Burned Bridges. Pulsing red dot on the monitor felt like a countdown to their execution. The massive, cavernous loft, which just moments ago had felt like a sanctuary, was suddenly shrinking, the walls closing in with terrifying speed. 2 miles out, Harper barked, her voice devoid of panic but laced with a razor-sharp, lethal focus. Professional operative had completely taken over. She grabbed the plastic burner phone from the drafting table, threw it onto the concrete floor, and brought the heel of her heavy combat boot down on it with a sickening crunch. The screen shattered into a spiderweb of dead pixels, but Harper didn't stop there. She kicked the crushed remains under the heavy metal leg of the drafting table. Killing the phone won't stop the micro-tracker's internal battery, but it might buy us 60 seconds if they have to search the floor for it. Olivia stood frozen for a fraction of a second, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was real. The terrifying, omnipotent shadow of James Sterling was no longer a metaphorical cage. It was a fleet of black SUVs speeding toward them through the dark, rain-slicked streets. What do we do? Olivia asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. She refused to break down. She refused to be the helpless wife anymore. We burn it all down, Harper replied, her fingers flying across the master console keyboard. Suddenly, a series of deafening metallic clunks echoed through the loft as Harper initiated the purge protocol. The glowing monitors flickered wildly before turning a violent, solid red. The smell of burning ozone and melting plastic filled the air as the localized server racks in the corner of the room began to literally fry themselves from the inside out. Harper was destroying months of surveillance, encrypted files, and back doors she had painstakingly built. She was wiping her entire digital existence off the map to protect them. Harper grabbed a heavy canvas duffel bag from beneath the desk, rapidly shoving a secure laptop, a handful of encrypted hard drives, and 2 sleek black handguns into the main compartment. Olivia's breath hitched at the sight of the weapons, the cold reality of the violence James was capable of suddenly crystallizing in her mind. 1 mile, Harper said, her eyes locked on a secondary handheld device. She zipped the duffel bag in one fluid motion, slinging it over her shoulder. She grabbed her leather jacket, tossing it on, and then reached out, grabbing Olivia's hand. Her grip was iron tight, a physical anchor in the swirling chaos. We move. Now. They ran toward the back of the massive warehouse, bypassing the reinforced steel front door. Harper led them down a narrow, pitch-black utility corridor that smelled of rust and damp earth. The end of the hall was a heavy freight elevator. Harper didn't press the button. Instead, she threw open the emergency stairwell door, pulling Olivia down the concrete steps 2 at a time. They burst out into a narrow, debris-filled alleyway that ran parallel to the shipping docks. Cold night air hit Olivia like a physical blow. Hidden beneath a rusted fire escape was Harper's heavy black motorcycle. Get on, Harper ordered, tossing the spare helmet to Olivia. Olivia shoved the helmet over her messy hair, her hand shaking so badly she could barely snap the chin strap. She scrambled onto the back of the leather seat, wrapping her arms fiercely around Harper's waist. She pressed her face against the cold leather of Harper's jacket, closing her eyes as the engine roared to life with a deafening, aggressive growl. Just as Harper kicked the kickstand up and slammed the bike into gear, the unmistakable screech of heavy tires echoed from the front of the warehouse. The harsh, blinding beams of halogen headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the chain-link fence at the end of the alley. James's private security team had arrived. "Hold on!" Harper yelled over the roar of the engine. Instead of heading toward the main street, Harper twisted the throttle, sending the heavy motorcycle rocketing in the opposite direction, tearing down the narrow, garbage-strewn alleyway. They wove through a maze of abandoned shipping containers and rusted-out cars, the motorcycle leaning dangerously close to the wet asphalt at every sharp turn. Olivia clung to Harper with terrifying strength, her knuckles turning white. She didn't look back. She knew if she looked back, she would see the ghosts of her old life trying to drag her down into the dark. They burst out of the industrial sector, merging seamlessly onto the chaotic, crowded lanes of the interstate highway heading back toward the heart of the city. The wind howled past them, an invisible wall of force that drowned out everything but the thunder of the engine. They rode in agonizing silence for 30 minutes, weaving through the late-night traffic, losing themselves in the sprawling, anonymous veins of the metropolis. Finally, Harper took a sharp exit, leading them into the gritty, neon-lit underbelly of the city's south side. She pulled the motorcycle into a dark, subterranean parking garage beneath an abandoned commercial building. The space was eerily quiet, the concrete walls damp and covered in faded graffiti. Harper drove to the very lowest level, pulling into a chained-off section behind a row of concrete pillars. She cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, ringing loudly in Olivia's ears. Harper immediately swung off the bike, ripping her helmet off and throwing it aggressively onto the concrete floor. Bounced with a loud, hollow crack. She began pacing the narrow space, her hands running frantically through her dark hair, her chest heaving as she fought to process the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "He found the warehouse," Harper muttered, her voice echoing in the empty garage. "He found the central hub. My servers are fried, but the physical location is burned. James isn't an idiot. Once his men breach that steel door and see the equipment, they're going to know it wasn't a lover's nest. They're going to know it was a professional staging ground. They're going to know it was me." Olivia slowly took off her own helmet, letting it slip from her trembling fingers. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead. She stepped toward Harper, catching the panicked, pacing woman by the shoulders. "Harper, look at me," Olivia demanded, her voice cutting through the panic with surprising authority. Harper stopped, her dark, intense eyes locking onto Olivia's hazel ones. The tough, untouchable facade was cracking, revealing a raw, desperate fear, not for herself but for the woman standing in front of her. "He knows I ran," Olivia said, her voice dropping to a steady, rhythmic whisper. The realization was washing over her, washing away the last traces of the obedient wife. "And he knows you betrayed him. The bridge is completely burned. There is no going back to the penthouse. There is no acting like everything is fine tomorrow morning. I have enough cash in the duffel bag to get us out of the country," Harper said rapidly, her hands moving down to grip Olivia's waist. "I have fake passports. We can leave the city tonight. We can disappear, Olivia. He can't hurt you if he can't find you." "No." The word hung in the damp, cold air of the garage. Harper blinked, entirely caught off guard by the sheer, unyielding stubbornness in Olivia's tone. "No? Olivia, you don't understand. James isn't going to just file divorce papers now. He's going to hunt us. He has the resources to make us vanish." "I am done vanishing," Olivia stated, stepping closer until their chests were touching. The oversized hoodie she wore swallowed her frame, but her presence felt massive, dominant. "I have spent 5 years disappearing into the background of that man's life. I am not going to spend the rest of my life running from him, looking over my shoulder, letting him keep the empire he built on my silence." Harper stared at her, mesmerized by the dark, dangerous fire burning in Olivia's eyes. The delicate, elegant woman James had tried to trap in a golden cage was gone. In her place stood an architect of ruin, a woman who had finally learned how to wield the power she had always possessed. "He took his best men to the warehouse," Olivia reasoned, her mind working with terrifying clarity. "He thought he was catching me in a lie. He thought he was closing the trap. Which means, right now, his entire security detail is tearing apart an empty loft in the industrial district." Harper's breath hitched as she realized exactly what Olivia was suggesting. "The Penthouse is operating on a skeleton crew," Olivia finished, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her lips. "James is arrogant. He thinks he's the hunter tonight. He isn't expecting the prey to walk right through his front door. We don't wait for next week. We don't wait for the audit. We hit the wall safe tonight. We take the hardware wallet, we take the 80 million, and we leave him with nothing but a crumbling company and a federal fraud charge." Harper let out a low, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head. The sheer audacity of the plan was borderline suicidal, but the logic was flawlessly terrifying. James had left the castle undefended to hunt the ghost. "You are absolutely insane," Harper whispered, her hands sliding up Olivia's back, pulling her flush against her body. "You said it yourself," Olivia murmured, her gaze dropping to Harper's lips. "I'm a nightmare." Harper didn't hesitate. She crushed her mouth against Olivia's, the kiss explosive and entirely consuming. It was a kiss fueled by adrenaline, danger, and a profound, unbreakable trust. Olivia kissed her back with equal ferocity, her hands tangling in Harper's dark hair, anchoring herself to the only real thing in her chaotic, beautiful new world. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing heavily, the magnetic tension between them fully ignited. Harper stepped back, her eyes entirely dark, completely committed to the madness. She walked over to the motorcycle, popping open the side compartment. She pulled out a sleek, black tactical jacket and tossed it to Olivia. "The hoodie is cute," Harper said, the arrogant bad girl smirk finally returning to her lips. "But if we're going to rob Chicago's most dangerous billionaire, you need to look the part. Put that on. We have a safe to crack." Olivia caught the jacket, shrugging off the oversized hoodie and slipping her arms into the tight, tailored leather. Fit perfectly, like a second skin. She zipped it up, feeling the weight of the material armor her body. She looked at Harper, her hazel eyes completely void of fear. "Let's go steal my severance package," Olivia said. Harper grinned, swinging her leg back over the motorcycle. The game was in its final, deadly stage, and Olivia Sterling was ready to play for blood. End of Part 7. Part 8, The Ghost in the Penthouse. The black motorcycle killed its engine a block away from the towering glass and steel monolith of the Sterling building. The night air was freezing, but beneath the sleek black tactical jacket Harper had given her, Olivia's skin was flushed with a raging, adrenaline-fueled heat. They pushed the heavy bike into a dark, recessed loading dock usually reserved for service trucks, hiding it behind a row of industrial dumpsters. Harper moved with terrifying efficiency. She didn't speak, she didn't have to. They were operating on a synchronized wavelength of pure survival. Harper pulled a sleek, matte black tablet from her duffel bag, connecting it via short wire to the digital keypad of the service entrance. Her fingers danced across the screen, the pale blue light illuminating the sharp angles of her face. "The building's main security hub is located on the ground floor," Harper whispered, her eyes never leaving the screen. "There are normally 4 guards on rotation. 2 are currently dispatched to the warehouse with James. 1 is at the front desk. The 4th is on a smoke break. I'm looping the service elevator camera feed. We have exactly a 3-minute window to cross the lobby and get into the private lift before he finishes his cigarette." Keypad flashed green with a soft click. The heavy service door unlocked. Harper looked at Olivia, her dark eyes intense. "You ready for this, princess? Once the elevator doors open in that penthouse, you are officially trespassing in your own life." Olivia zipped the tactical jacket up to her collarbone, a cold, calculating smile touching her lips. "I'm not trespassing. I'm evicting." Harper's smirk returned, a flash of pure, dangerous pride. She pushed the door open, and they slipped into the sterile, fluorescent-lit service corridor. They moved like ghosts. Harper led the way, her heavy combat boots making absolutely no sound against the polished concrete. They navigated the maze of back hallways until they reached the ornate, gold-leafed private elevator that serviced only the top 3 floors. Harper didn't bother with the retinal scanner next to the call button. She popped the plastic casing off the wall panel with a small pocket knife, spliced 2 wires together, and connected them to her tablet. 10 agonizing seconds passed. The silence of the empty building was deafening. Olivia stood close behind Harper, her chest brushing against Harper's back, her hazel eyes scanning the hallway for any sign of movement. She could smell the dark roast coffee and rain on Harper's skin, a scent that had become her only anchor in the madness. Ding! The gold doors slid silently open. They stepped inside. Harper bypassed the floor buttons entirely, overriding the system from her tablet to send the car shooting upward. The sudden acceleration pressed them heavily into the mirrored floor of the elevator. Olivia looked at their reflection in the polished brass walls. The woman staring back at her was completely unrecognizable. Gone was the perfectly coiffed, docile wife wrapped in expensive pastel silk. In her place stood a woman in black leather, her hair messy, her eyes burning with a dark, ruthless fire. Next to her, Harper looked like a shadow assassin, her jaw clenched, her tattooed arms taut with tension. They looked lethal. They looked like they belonged together. "When we step out," Harper murmured, pulling a suppressed black handgun from her holster and checking the chamber with a sharp metallic clack, "stay exactly 2 steps behind me. If the skeleton crew left a guard in the apartment, I will handle it. Do not hesitate. Do not freeze." "I won't," Olivia promised, her voice steady. The elevator decelerated, the numbers above the door flashing PH. The doors slid open, revealing the cavernous, sprawling living room of the penthouse. It was completely dark, illuminated only by the sprawling, glittering skyline of Chicago pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The silence was absolute. The marble floors, the white leather furniture, the abstract art, it all looked like a perfectly preserved museum exhibit. It looked like a tomb. Harper swept the room, the barrel of her weapon tracking every shadow, every corner. She moved with fluid, lethal grace, clearing the living room, the kitchen, and the grand hallway in under a minute. "Clear," Harper whispered, lowering the weapon slightly but keeping it ready. He didn't leave a guard inside. He's too paranoid. He doesn't want his own men snooping around his private study. "This way," Olivia said, taking the lead. She walked down the long, cold hallway, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She stopped in front of the heavy, mahogany double doors of James's private study. The room he had forbidden her from entering without his explicit permission. The room where he had plotted her ruin. She pushed the doors open. The study smelled of expensive cigars, old paper, and imported leather. The moonlight cast long, dramatic shadows across the massive oak desk and the walls lined with leather-bound books. But Olivia's eyes immediately locked onto the far wall, where a massive, imposing oil portrait of James's grandfather hung, staring down at them with judgmental, painted eyes. "Behind the painting," Olivia whispered. Harper moved instantly. She holstered her weapon, stepped up to the wall, and gripped the heavy gilded frame of the portrait. With a strong pull, the painting swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a sleek, matte-black steel wall safe embedded deep into the reinforced concrete. The surface of the safe was featureless, save for a small, glowing red retinal scanner and a digital keypad. "All right," Harper breathed, dropping her duffel bag to the floor and pulling out her laptop and a specialized optical cable. "I need 60 seconds to blind the security mainframe and feed a localized loop into the camera above the door. Once the light turns green, I'll bypass the retinal lock. But the alphanumeric code is on you, Olivia. If you get it wrong 3 times, the internal mechanism completely seizes, and it alerts the private security detail instantly. Just get the eye scanner open, Olivia said, stepping up beside Harper, her eyes locked on the digital keypad. Harper dropped to one knee, her fingers flying across the laptop keyboard in a blur of motion. Lines of green code cascaded down the black screen. Tension in the room was so thick it was suffocating. Every creak of the building settling sounded like a gunshot. Bypassing the optical sensors, Harper muttered, connecting the cable directly to a tiny port beneath the safe's keypad. Injecting the backdoor sequence. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2. The glowing red light on the retinal scanner suddenly flashed a brilliant, solid green. A soft, mechanical were echoed from inside the steel door. The biometrics are bypassed, Harper said, standing up and stepping back, her chest heaving. She looked at Olivia, her dark eyes filled with absolute trust. You're up, princess. 12 characters. What does the devil use to lock his doors? Olivia stepped forward. She stared at the keypad. Her mind raced through the countless dinners, the boastful speeches, the quiet, arrogant moments James had forced her to endure. He was a narcissist. He didn't care about his wife. He barely cared about his company. He only cared about his own supremacy. What does he consider his greatest achievement? Olivia thought desperately. Not his wedding. Not his properties. He always called himself the apex predator of Chicago real estate, Olivia murmured, her fingers hovering over the glowing keys. He said everyone else was just prey. Olivia took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly. She typed the letters out. APEXPREDATOR. 12 characters. She hit the enter key. A sharp, angry beep echoed through the silent study. The screen flashed a bright warning red. Error. Attempt 1 failed. 2 attempts remaining. Damn it, Olivia hissed, stepping back as if the safe had burned her. It's okay, Harper said softly, resting a warm, grounding hand on Olivia's lower back. Breathe. Think. Don't guess what he says to the public. Guess what he believes in the dark. What is his deepest obsession? Olivia closed her eyes. The scent of Harper's leather jacket grounded her. What did James believe in the dark? He believed he was entirely untouchable. He believed he was the only true king of the Sterling Empire. But he hadn't built the empire. His father had. And James hated his father. The buyout, Olivia whispered, her eyes flying open. 4 years ago, he forcefully bought out his older brother, effectively exiling him from the family to take absolute control of the board. It was the moment he became the sole king. He told me it was the day he finally cut the dead weight. What was the date? Harper asked, the urgency bleeding into her voice. October 14th, Olivia said, her mind working with terrifying clarity. But that's only numbers. He needs letters. His initials. She stepped back up to the keypad. JS1014202226. She hit enter. Beep. Error. Attempt 2 failed. 1 attempt remaining. Warning, final attempt will trigger lockdown. A cold spike of absolute panic pierced Olivia's chest. Her breathing hitched, her hands dropping to her sides. I don't know it. Harper, I don't know it. Hey, Harper said, grabbing Olivia by the shoulders and forcefully turning her around. Harper's face was inches from hers, her dark eyes burning with fierce, unyielding confidence. Look at me. Do not let him win. He is not smarter than you. He is just crueler. Think about the money, Olivia. It's an offshore account in the Caymans. Why is it there? To hide it, Olivia said, her voice shaking. To keep it away from the board. To keep it away from... Olivia stopped. A massive, horrifying realization washed over her. He wasn't just hiding it from the board. He was hiding it from the government, from his creditors, and most importantly, from the prenuptial agreement. The entire point of the offshore account was to ensure Olivia got nothing if the marriage imploded. The money was his escape hatch from her. "He's a sick, twisted man," Olivia whispered, a cold, venomous calm washing over her entirely. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. There was only the kill left. He wouldn't just use a date. He would use the safe as a daily reminder of his ultimate goal. He would use it to mock me, knowing I was sleeping in the other room, completely oblivious. Olivia turned back to the keypad. She didn't hesitate. Her fingers struck the keys with absolute lethal precision. NOTHINGLEFT. 12 letters. Nothing left. The exact amount he intended to leave her with. She slammed the enter key. The silence in the study was agonizing. For one long, endless second, nothing happened. Then, a heavy, mechanical series of metallic clicks echoed from deep within the reinforced steel. The heavy locking bolts violently retracted. A soft hiss of pressurized air escaped the seal, and the heavy steel door slowly swung open. Harper let out a long, ragged breath, a sound of pure disbelief. "You terrifying, beautiful genius." Olivia didn't smile. She reached into the dark cavity of the safe. Inside, sitting on a velvet tray, was a sleek silver hardware wallet. A tiny digital screen on the drive displayed the encrypted balance: $80,450,000. Next to the drive was a thick stack of manila folders. Olivia pulled them out, flipping open the top file. It was filled with forged documents, meticulously faked photos of Olivia with other men, and a pre-signed, undated petition for divorce citing egregious infidelity. James had already built the coffin. He was just waiting to push her inside. "Grab the drive," Harper ordered, rapidly unplugging her tablet and stuffing her laptop back into the duffel bag. "We have the money. We have the proof of his fraud. We can burn him to the ground in federal court. We need to move. Now." Olivia grabbed the silver drive, slipping it securely into the interior pocket of her tactical jacket. She held on to the blackmail folders. She turned toward Harper, an absolute triumphant high rushing through her veins. They had done it. They had broken the cage. But as Harper reached for her duffel bag, the heavy mahogany doors of the study suddenly rattled. The soft, unmistakable chime of the private elevator echoed down the long hallway. Harper froze, her eyes widening in sheer terror. The blood drained completely from her face. She looked at her tablet, which was still displaying the hacked security feed of the lobby. "The loop dropped," Harper whispered, the sound barely audible. The lobby guard came back early. He saw the override. Heavy, hurried footsteps echoed against the marble floor of the hallway. It wasn't just one person. It was a team. And leading the charge, shouting orders in a voice that made Olivia's blood run entirely cold, was James. "They're in the study," James's voice roared, echoing through the penthouse with murderous rage. "Lock down the elevators. Don't let them out." Harper ripped the suppressed handgun from her holster, stepping directly in front of Olivia, shielding her with her own body. She aimed the weapon at the heavy mahogany doors, her jaw clenched, her dark eyes entirely devoid of fear, replaced by a cold, violent resolve. "Olivia," Harper said, her voice a deadly, low growl. "Get behind the desk. Do not move. And whatever happens, do not give him that drive." Before Olivia could speak, the mahogany doors violently exploded inward. End of Part 8. Part 9, The Shattered Glass. The heavy mahogany doors didn't just open, they violently splintered inward, the heavy brass hinges tearing straight out of the doorframe. A deafening crash echoed through the cavernous study as the wood hit the marble floor. Through the swirling dust and the dim light, 3 figures stepped into the room. Flanking the doorway were 2 massive, heavily armored men holding matte black assault rifles, the red laser sights immediately slicing through the darkness and painting Harper's chest. But it was the man standing between them who sucked all the oxygen out of the room. James Sterling stood perfectly composed, wearing an immaculate tailored charcoal suit. He didn't look like a man whose financial empire was on the brink of absolute collapse. He looked like an emperor who had just caught rats in his kitchen. "Well," James said, his voice a smooth, venomous drawl that sent a profound chill down Olivia's spine. "I have to admit, Harper, when you fried the servers at the warehouse, I thought you were making a run for the border. I genuinely didn't expect you to be stupid enough to walk right back into the lion's den." Harper didn't flinch. Her suppressed handgun remained perfectly level, aimed directly at the center of James's chest. "I'm not in a den, James. I'm in a sinking ship. And we just took the last lifeboat." James's cold eyes flicked from the barrel of Harper's gun to the gaping, empty hole of the wall safe behind her. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. His jaw tightened, a vein pulsing dangerously at his temple. But then, his gaze shifted slightly, landing on the woman standing beside the desk. Olivia stood tall, the black tactical jacket zipped up tightly, the forged divorce papers clutched in one hand and the silver hardware wallet securely hidden in her pocket. She didn't cower. She didn't drop her gaze. She looked right through the man she had called her husband for 5 years. James let out a low, mocking chuckle. "Olivia. My beautiful, obedient, painfully naive Olivia. What are you wearing? Are you playing dress-up with the hired help now?" "The game is over, James," Olivia said, her voice ringing out clear and steady. The sound of her own strength surprised her, but it felt intoxicating. She held up the manila folders, letting them drop onto the heavy oak desk with a loud slap. "I read the files. I know about the Caymans. I know about the forged photos. You weren't just going to leave me. You were going to throw me to the wolves to cover up your own pathetic failures." James sighed, a sound of profound boredom, as if he were dealing with a petulant child. He took a slow step into the room, waving a dismissive hand at his armed guards to hold their fire. "You were an asset, Olivia," James stated coldly. "A beautiful piece of art I acquired to elevate my public image. But assets depreciate. The firm is bleeding, and I needed a scapegoat. You were perfect for the role. Tragic, scandalous, a distraction the tabloids would feast on for months while I quietly restructured my capital. By stealing $80 million from your own board of directors?" Harper spat, her finger tightening slightly on the trigger. "Survival of the fittest," James retorted, a cruel smile twisting his features. He reached inside his suit jacket. Instantly, Harper stepped slightly in front of Olivia, her stance widening. "Keep your hands where I can see them, James. I will put a hollow point through your heart before your gorillas even flinch." James slowly withdrew his hand, revealing nothing but a silk pocket square. He dabbed it against his brow, shaking his head. "You won't shoot me, Harper. 'Cause you're trapped. Private elevator is locked down. The stairwell is currently flooding with the rest of my security team. You have nowhere to run." He dropped the silk square to the floor. His eyes darkened, turning completely hollow. "Here is what is going to happen," James dictated, his voice dropping to a terrifying, absolute monotone. "You are going to toss the silver drive across the desk. In exchange, my men will shoot you, Harper. Quick, clean death. As for my darling wife, well, tabloids love a home invasion story. The rogue security consultant broke in, tried to rob the safe, and tragically killed poor Olivia in the crossfire before my men could stop her. A devastated, grieving widower makes for incredible PR. Olivia's blood ran entirely cold. The sheer, unfathomable sociopathy of the man was monstrous. He was going to slaughter them both and use their blood to buy himself public sympathy." Harper let out a dark, raspy laugh. It wasn't a sound of fear, it was a sound of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "You know your problem, James?" Harper said, her dark eyes flashing with a wild, dangerous light. "You rely too much on technology you don't understand." Without moving her gun arm, Harper subtly shifted her weight. Her left hand, hidden slightly behind her hip, held a small, matte black detonator switch. "What are you talking about?" James demanded, his brow furrowing. "I'm the one who installed your smart home security mainframe," Harper whispered, a wicked smirk tearing across her face. "Did you really think I wouldn't leave myself a backdoor?" Harper's thumb pressed the button. All at once, the entire penthouse plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness as the main breaker completely severed. Before James or his men could react to the sudden blackout, the emergency fire suppression system violently engaged. But it wasn't water. It was the localized high-pressure halon gas system designed to protect the expensive art and rare books in the study. A deafening, hissing roar filled the room as thick, blinding white chemical smoke blasted from the ceiling vents, completely obliterating any remaining visibility. "Fire! Put them down!" James screamed over the roar of the gas. The deafening staccato boom of assault rifles instantly shattered the room. Muzzle flashes strobed through the thick white smoke like lightning in a hurricane. Bullets ripped through the leather-bound books, shattering the heavy glass of the mahogany desk and tearing into the walls. Harper didn't hesitate. The second the lights cut, she grabbed Olivia by the tactical jacket, pulling her forcefully to the marble floor. "Stay low. Crawl," Harper shouted over the gunfire, firing 2 precise, suppressed shots toward the doorway to keep James's men pinned down. A heavy grunt echoed from the smoke. She had hit someone. Olivia scrambled on her hands and knees, the thick halon gas burning her lungs and making her eyes water. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and pulverized plaster. Bullets rained completely blindly into the room. A massive chunk of the heavy oak desk exploded inches from Olivia's face, showering her in sharp splinters. Harper was right beside her, physically shielding Olivia with her own body as they crawled toward the heavy, floor-to-ceiling glass doors that led to the private wraparound terrace. "We can't go out there," Olivia yelled, coughing violently as the gas thickened. "We're 40 stories up. There's nowhere to go. Trust me," Harper roared back. Harper rose to a crouch, aiming her weapon at the massive sheet of reinforced smart glass that separated them from the night air. She emptied the rest of her magazine into the center of the pane in a tight, concentrated circle. The bulletproof glass spiderwebbed, glowing a faint, fractured white. Harper dropped the empty gun, spun around, and delivered a devastating spinning back kick directly to the weakened center of the glass. The entire window exploded outward with a deafening crash, raining thousands of glittering shards onto the terrace. The sudden breach instantly sucked the thick white halon gas out into the freezing night air, momentarily clearing the room. Through the clearing smoke, James emerged, his face cut by flying glass, his eyes wild with absolute fury. He grabbed an assault rifle from his wounded guard, leveling it directly at Olivia's back as she scrambled through the shattered window. "No!" James roared. "Move!" Harper screamed, grabbing Olivia's arm and violently shoving her out onto the freezing, wind-swept terrace. A burst of automatic gunfire erupted. Harper let out a sharp, breathless grunt, her body jerking forward as they tumbled out onto the stone balcony. She collapsed hard against the stone balustrade. "Harper!" Olivia screamed, scrambling to her feet and rushing to her. Harper was clutching her left shoulder. Thick, dark blood was welling up rapidly between her tattooed fingers, staining her black leather jacket. Her face was pale, tight with agonizing pain, but her eyes remained fiercely focused. "I'm fine, it's a through and through," Harper grit out through clenched teeth, forcing herself up against the stone railing. "The rig! Go to the rig!" Olivia looked over the side of the balcony. Suspended just below the lip of the stone balustrade was the massive, motorized steel gondola used by the window-washing crew, hanging precariously over the dizzying 40-story drop. Harper had positioned it there before they ever entered the building. "Get in!" Harper yelled, her voice straining. More footsteps crunched on the broken glass behind them. James was walking out onto the terrace, the assault rifle raised, a demonic silhouette framed by the flashing red emergency lights of the penthouse. Olivia didn't think. Pure, primal survival instinct took over. She threw one leg over the stone railing, stepping down onto the heavy steel grating of the gondola. Swayed violently under her weight, the terrifying abyss of the Chicago skyline yawning directly beneath her. She turned back, reaching both hands out. "Harper! Come on!" Harper vaulted over the railing with one arm, crying out in pain as her wounded shoulder took the impact. She landed heavily on the steel grating next to Olivia. James stepped up to the shattered window. "You think a maintenance rig is going to save you? I'll shoot the cables." Harper didn't reach for the control panel. Instead, she pulled a heavy, tactical combat knife from her boot. "Hold on to the railing, Olivia." Harper screamed. "What? Hold on." Harper drove the serrated edge of the blade directly into the heavy, computerized control box of the gondola's winch system, violently severing the primary brake line. A terrifying metallic snap echoed in the night air. Gravity took over instantly. The steel gondola dropped like a stone, plummeting into the dark, freezing abyss of the city. Olivia screamed, her hands locking onto the metal railing with a death grip as her stomach vaulted into her throat. Above them, James's furious roar and a spray of frantic, useless gunfire faded into the howling rush of the wind. They were falling. Cage was broken. And as the city lights blurred into a streak of neon fire, Olivia looked at the bleeding, fiercely smiling woman beside her, knowing they were finally truly free. End of story. Part 10: The Apex Predators. The sensation of falling was absolute, terrifying perfection. For 5 years, Olivia had felt like she was suffocating in slow motion. Now, plummeting down the glass and steel facade of the Sterling building in the dead of night, she was finally breathing. The wind howled like a wounded animal, violently whipping her hair around her face as the steel gondola dropped through the dark abyss. Beside her, Harper was a dark, coiled spring. Despite the blood soaking through her leather jacket, her dark eyes were entirely focused. They were in a free fall, but Harper was still the one steering. "Hold on!" Harper roared over the deafening rush of the wind. They had dropped nearly 20 stories in a matter of seconds. The streetlights below were rushing up to meet them at a lethal speed. Harper threw her entire body weight against the heavy red emergency friction brake located on the main winch drum. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, a horrific, ear-splitting shriek of tearing metal and burning brake pads echoed into the night. Massive showers of orange sparks erupted from the steel cables as the brake violently engaged. The deceleration was brutal. Olivia was thrown hard against the metal grating of the floor, the breath completely knocked out of her lungs. The gondola shuddered, groaned, and bounced on the heavily strained cables before finally coming to a violent, swinging halt. Olivia lay on the cold steel, gasping for air, her ears ringing. She looked up. They were suspended just 5 stories above a dark, narrow alleyway that ran behind the building. Penthouse was a distant, flashing red speck in the sky above them. "Harper!" Olivia choked out, forcing herself up onto her hands and knees. Harper was slumped against the control panel, her breathing ragged. She looked at Olivia, a weak but undeniably triumphant smirk touching her lips. "I told you. I wouldn't let you fall, princess." "We need to move," Olivia said, the adrenaline surging back into her veins. She scrambled over to Harper, wrapping her arm around Harper's uninjured side and pulling her to her feet. Harper pointed a shaking, blood-stained finger toward the adjacent building. The gondola was swinging gently, stopping mere feet away from the flat, gravel-covered rooftop of an old parking garage. "Jump," Harper ordered, her voice tight with pain. They didn't hesitate. As the gondola swung closest to the concrete ledge, Olivia held tightly onto Harper, and together they vaulted over the steel railing. They hit the gravel roof hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Harper let out a sharp cry of pain, clutching her bleeding shoulder as she came to a stop. Olivia was on her feet instantly. She pulled Harper up, dragging her toward the heavy metal door that led into the parking garage stairwell. They descended the concrete steps in absolute, agonizing silence. Every step Harper took was labored, but the fierce survivalist fire in her eyes never dimmed. When they reached the ground floor, they slipped out the back exit into the damp, garbage-strewn alleyway. Hidden beneath a ripped canvas tarp in a recessed loading bay was a beat-up, unassuming gray sedan. "Keys are under the driver's side floor mat," Harper whispered, leaning heavily against the brick wall and sliding down until she was sitting on the wet asphalt. She was losing too much blood. Her skin was turning a pale, ghostly white in the dim light of the alley. Olivia didn't panic. The woman who would have fainted at the sight of blood in her pristine penthouse was dead. Olivia ripped the tarp off the car, found the keys, and unlocked the doors. She practically carried Harper into the passenger seat, buckling her in before sprinting around to the driver's side. The engine sputtered to life with a quiet hum. Olivia threw it into drive and sped out of the alley, merging seamlessly into the sparse late-night traffic of Chicago. She drove erratically but with terrifying purpose, taking random turns, weaving through industrial districts and desolate neighborhoods, ensuring they were completely untrackable. An hour later, they pulled up to a decaying, neon-lit motel on the absolute outskirts of the city limits. The sign above the office flickered with a buzzing, broken vacancy light. It was the perfect place for ghosts to hide. Olivia paid the apathetic night clerk with a crisp $100 bill from Harper's pocket, taking the physical key to room 14. The room smelled of stale smoke and bleach. The floral bedspread was hideous, and the single lamp cast a sickly yellow glow. To Olivia, it was the most beautiful room she had ever seen. She locked the heavy wooden door, sliding the chain into place. She guided Harper to the edge of the mattress. Harper let out a heavy groan, her head falling back against the cheap headboard, her eyes fluttering shut. "Stay awake," Olivia commanded softly but firmly. She went into the tiny, dingy bathroom, grabbing the cheap white towels and turning the hot water on in the sink. When she came back out, she knelt in front of Harper. Carefully, reverently, Olivia unzipped the blood-soaked leather jacket, easing it off Harper's shoulders. Harper hissed in pain as the fabric pulled away from the wound. Olivia then took a pair of trauma shears from Harper's duffel bag and carefully cut away the ruined black tank top. The bullet had gone clean through the fleshy part of her left shoulder, missing the bone and the major arteries. It was a messy, painful wound, but it wasn't fatal. "I've got you," Olivia whispered, soaking a towel in the warm water and gently cleaning the blood from Harper's skin. Her hands were incredibly steady, her touch infinitely tender. Harper opened her eyes, looking down at the elegant, beautiful woman kneeling on the dirty motel carpet, her hands stained with blood. The fierce, untouchable bad girl suddenly looked incredibly vulnerable. "You didn't run," Harper murmured, her voice thick with exhaustion and awe. "When the glass shattered, when he had the gun on me, you stayed. You jumped onto that rig for me." "I jumped for us," Olivia corrected softly. She opened the medical kit, pouring antiseptic over a gauze pad. "This is going to burn." She pressed the pad to the wound. Harper violently tensed, her jaw locking shut, but she didn't make a sound. Olivia worked quickly and efficiently, packing the entry and exit wounds before tightly wrapping Harper's shoulder with thick white bandages. When it was done, Olivia sat back on her heels, letting out a long, trembling breath. The adrenaline was finally beginning to crash, leaving behind a profound, aching exhaustion. Harper reached out with her good arm, her fingers tangling gently in Olivia's messy, wind-blown hair. She pulled Olivia forward, sliding off the edge of the bed until she was kneeling on the floor right in front of her. "You are the most terrifying thing I have ever encountered," Harper whispered, her dark eyes entirely consumed by a raw, burning devotion. "Good," Olivia breathed, leaning in. Kiss was entirely different from the frantic, desperate collisions they had shared before. It was slow, deep, and heavily laden with absolute certainty. The taste of copper and rain mixed with the undeniable reality that they had won. Olivia wrapped her arms around Harper's neck, pulling her impossibly close, burying her face into the curve of Harper's uninjured shoulder. They stayed on the floor for a long time, holding on to each other in the dim, yellow light of the motel room, the rest of the world completely locked out. The next morning, the gray light of dawn crept through the cheap plastic blinds. Harper was sleeping deeply on the mattress, the painkillers from the med kit finally doing their job. Olivia sat at the tiny, rickety desk in the corner of the room, Harper's secure laptop glowing brightly in front of her. The silver hardware wallet was plugged into the USB port. The balance still read an untouched, glorious $80,450,000. But Olivia wasn't looking at the money. She was looking at the blackmail files, the forged divorce papers, and the digital ledger of James's massive financial fraud. James thought he was the architect of ruin. He was wrong. Olivia opened an encrypted email client. She attached the heavily documented proof of James's offshore embezzlement, the internal communications proving he was actively bleeding the sterling firm dry, and the files he had manufactured to frame her. She didn't just send it to the FBI. She sent it to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the IRS, the primary investors of the sterling firm, the entire board of directors, and the editorial desks of the top 3 major newspapers in Chicago. She looked at the screen for a long, quiet moment. The man who had trapped her in a golden cage, who had tried to have her slaughtered on a balcony, was about to wake up to a nuclear explosion. Olivia hit send. She closed the laptop, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her lips. The apex predator of Chicago real estate was officially dead. 3 months later. The sun was a blinding, brilliant gold, reflecting off the crystal-clear turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea. A warm, salty breeze drifted across the massive private wooden deck of a luxury cliffside villa in the Cayman Islands. Olivia stood at the edge of the infinity pool, staring out at the endless horizon. She was wearing a flowing, sheer white sundress that caught the ocean breeze, her hazel eyes bright, clear, and completely devoid of shadows. The heavy, suffocating weight of her past life felt like a distant, fated nightmare. The news of James Sterling's spectacular downfall had dominated the global headlines for weeks. The federal raid on the Sterling building had happened hours after Olivia hit send. James was currently sitting in a federal holding facility, denied bail, facing decades in prison for massive corporate fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. His empire was liquidated. His legacy was ash. A pair of strong, heavily tattooed arms wrapped around Olivia's waist from behind, pulling her flush against a warm body. "You're thinking too loudly," Harper murmured, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the bare skin of Olivia's neck. Harper was wearing a simple black bikini top and faded denim shorts. The white scar on her left shoulder was visible, a permanent, beautiful reminder of the night they broke the cage. She looked relaxed, healthy, and devastatingly gorgeous in the tropical sunlight. "Just thinking about the exchange rate," Olivia lied smoothly, leaning back into Harper's embrace, completely melting into the touch. Harper chuckled, a deep, raspy sound that sent a familiar thrill down Olivia's spine. "We have $80 million, princess. I think we can afford the good tequila tonight." "We can afford whatever we want," Olivia said softly, turning around in Harper's arms to face her. She reached up, her fingers tracing the sharp, perfect line of Harper's jaw, her thumb brushing against the silver lip ring. Harper's dark eyes stared back at her, filled with a wild, untamed love that made Olivia's breath catch every single time. They were no longer the hunter and the prey. They were equals. They were absolute partners in crime, and they had stolen the world. "Are you happy, Olivia?" Harper asked, her voice dropping to an intimate, husky whisper. Olivia smiled, a real, genuine, breathtaking smile. She pulled Harper down, crashing her lips against hers in a deep, passionate kiss beneath the blinding tropical sun. "I've never been more alive," Olivia whispered against her lips. End of story. Wow, guys, can we just take a deep breath together after that ending? That was an absolute roller coaster from start to finish. It's your GL girlfriend here, and we seriously need to talk about everything that just happened in this story because my heart is still pounding. Let's break down Olivia's character arc first because it is absolutely iconic. We started the story with this woman who was essentially a prisoner in a golden cage. Her husband, James, thought he had completely broken her spirit, right? He saw her as this fragile, obedient asset that he could control and eventually throw away to save himself. But the moment Olivia realized she had nothing left to lose, she turned into an absolute mastermind. The way she manipulated the situation, outsmarted her own billionaire husband, and figured out the passcode to that safe? Pure genius. Just goes to show you should never underestimate a woman who is tired of playing the victim. She didn't just escape the cage, she burned it to the ground. And then we have Harper. Oh, Harper. Can we talk about the ultimate bad girl aesthetic? The leather jacket, the motorcycle, that silver lip ring, absolutely swoon-worthy. But what I love most about her character is that she isn't just a tough exterior. Underneath all that arrogance and danger, she had this incredibly protective nature. The moment she locked eyes with Olivia in that rainy diner, you could feel the chemistry pulling them together. She risked her entire career, her freedom, and literally took a bullet to protect the woman she fell in love with. Contrast between her cold, ruthless profession and her warm, fierce devotion to Olivia is just chef's kiss. And James, wow. He really thought he was the apex predator of the city, didn't he? It was so incredibly satisfying to see his arrogance become his ultimate downfall. He was so busy trying to frame Olivia and hunt down Harper that he didn't even realize they had already checkmated him. That shootout in the dark penthouse and the escape on the window washing rig? I was literally holding my breath. But enough about what I think, I want to hear from you guys. Let's get a conversation going in the comments. Which scene was your absolute favorite? Did you feel the tension in the dive bar, the romance on the balcony, or were you screaming during the penthouse escape? Also, I have to ask, what would you do if you managed to steal $80 million and escape to the Caymans with a gorgeous biker girl? Let me know down below. If you enjoyed this intense, romantic, and thrilling GL story, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know what kind of stories you want to hear next. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload from your GL girlfriend. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and for being the best community out there. I love you all, and I will see you in the next story. Bye for now.